Hello everyone, this is Titus Merca from cgcookie.com, here to bring you a new tutorial on gun concept design for production. In this three-part tutorial, we will be focusing on silhouette exploration to create a unique and interesting gun concept that will later be polished into a final product. Let's get started. So today we'll be creating three silhouettes of sci-fi sniper rifles for our tutorial here today. I have Photoshop open right now. It's a 2000 by 2000 pixel wide document. It doesn't really matter what you start off with. You can always take the crop tool and make it a little bit wider if needed. Since we are working with sniper rifles, this will probably be useful to start off with. And then you can just, by default, when you crop, it will make the background into a white, whatever your background color is. So to change that, you just pick the color of your original background and you can just drop it in with a bucket tool by pressing G. These are my brushes that I start off with usually. They're always just very simple hard edge circle. I don't like using textures too much with guns. They are inorganic shapes and it helps just to start off with something hard edge. This brush in particular has no opacity jitter on it whatsoever or flow jitter. It's just 100% round. No size jitter on it either. While I'm drawing, I want to talk a little bit about what makes a successful silhouette. If you think about Batman or Captain America, and if you were to put them on a white background and their character would just be filled with a solid black color, you would instantly know who that character was. Obviously I gave it away, but if you were just to see them in a comic or a movie, for instance, Batman is notorious for being in the dark, and having that successful silhouette makes him distinguishable to know who that character is when he's approached to the audience. Same goes with guns too. You want to have a gun that can read from far distance, and you can tell that it's either, for example, it's an M4, A1, an M16. They look the same to an extent, but they have very iconic silhouettes that make them distinguishable from each other. A nice trick I like to use is using the transform tool and grabbing the edges or the middle square of the box to warp around shapes that I already have to quickly get the shape that I desire. I use this technique quite a bit when I make silhouettes. It's a very sloppy, easy way of creating potentially unique shapes. And the biggest thing that I encourage you guys to do is to really exaggerate your shapes. Try something new. I know it gets hard sometimes where we get stuck in a system where we keep creating the same shapes that we're very comfortable using and we know are very safe. But as artists, we learn all the time when we're drawing, and we learn different designs and techniques as we go, and we learn these things as we progress in our careers. And I think that's what really makes a successful artist, is that they literally tried every single design. I don't think it's actually that literal, but they've been in the industry, they've drawn for quite a bit. They know what works, they know what doesn't work. Everything just becomes kind of instinctual on how to make something look good. One of the best ways of making a successful silhouette is definitely looking at reference. When I typically look for reference, it can be anything from an actual gun, a car part, or machines that exist in today's technology. The other nice thing that makes silhouettes work in a sense of believability is educating yourself a little bit on the engineering aspects of a gun. For example, we all know what a pistol grip is and the trigger and the barrel and all that, but knowing where to put the ejection port in comparison to the magazine clip is very important and will help sell your silhouette and make it look believable. This first silhouette was giving me a little bit of trouble. I was trying to find some sort of unique shape. Typically, in such an early stage, I don't like to stress myself out too much about it. If something doesn't work, I erase it immediately and I don't look back at the decision I made. It's this kind of an instinctual feeling that artists get over time when they're drawing, and it just comes down to making mistakes and you typically remember the good designs versus the bad designs, and it sticks with you for quite a while. And that will eventually come back when you're doing another project. Maybe it's another gun concept, and you will remember from your previous mistakes what works and what doesn't work. One thing I do want to point out is that this tutorial is not sped up at all. I know I get this question a lot from artists that are starting out. They think they work too slow, but I think working too fast and selling yourself short on really creating something awesome is worse than working too slow. In a production environment, this is always a debate between art directors and managers. Sometimes a concept may be an awesome idea that you may think will need a lot of time to flesh out, but depending on when the publishers have their milestones, depends on how much time you will really be working on concepts. There are times where you will have to create a gun concept, maybe in a day or in a couple of hours. Sometimes you will probably not even hit a final, something that is really high polished, maybe something that is a silhouette, maybe just enough for a modeler to get going. Sometimes a lot of games put placeholders into their games, which are just non-detailed geometry that is thrown in there to kind of fill up the space. So I would say, in terms of speed, something with these silhouettes, this one took roughly 30 minutes for 3 of them, and it is pretty slow, but for something in such an early stage, and for something that I was having some fun with, trying to come up with something very unique is tough at times. And sometimes you get blocks, sometimes you can cruise through them, but in this case, my mind wasn't working for me as well as I hoped. But this first silhouette, it's coming along pretty nicely. I like a lot of the shapes. There's a lot of story that could be told within this gun. I know that sounds kind of weird, but these different shapes could be, different technology. This buttstock over here, it looks like, you can put some pistons or something in here to kind of absorb some of the explosive force of this sniper rifle when you shoot it. These little objects up here at the top, they can be some sort of sensor. Maybe there isn't a need for a scope. Maybe the scope is within the person's eyes with contact lenses, maybe. So it's definitely really fun to think about stuff like that and try and figure out just some unique, creative ideas for this gun, just to make it stand out. Because once you somewhat define the function of these parts, the more believable it will become, which is your ultimate goal. One thing I do want to point out, you'll see I'm making these straight lines with my brush. I'm using the eraser tool right now. It's the same brush as I had before. It's just the hard edge, 100% circle brush. When you click on an area with the eraser brush and you hold shift and you click on another area, it will make a straight line from the first point that you click to the second time. You can also, while holding shift before clicking, you can make a perfectly straight line either vertically or horizontally depending on your initial direction. This helps tremendously, and this is probably the bread and butter of making silhouettes for guns. My technique, at least, is using this this very, very helpful tool that Photoshop has given us. So again, just cutting in, adding, subtracting parts, shapes, interesting shapes. I'm not really liking this shape up here. Just going to delete it with the rectangle marquee tool. One thing that I've noticed in some sniper rifles is that this whole top rail from the buttstock through the barrel is perfectly straight. You can see this in the Barrett 50 caliber, so I'm just gonna grab that real quick and just drop it so it kind of lines up with the buttstock. So this one is looking pretty good. We can start making a new silhouette. I want to give myself a little bit room using the crop tool again and then grabbing the current background layer. I can achieve that. Quick way to duplicate a layer is by hitting Control J, and I just simply did that and dragged the first silhouette down just so I can have something to work off with right off the bat. It gives me some shapes that I can modify. I'm going to take this buttstock real quick and just Control X to cut it, and then Control V to slap it back in, and then using Control T to get the transform tool, I can flip it horizontally by right-clicking on the transformation. And then when you have two layers, you can either merge down by right-clicking and clicking merge down, or you can hit Control E. These are just quick ways of workflow that I like to practice. So the same idea goes for this gun as the previous one, creating unique shapes. Shape that I just made right there, it kind of looks like an M4A1. Kind of want to stick away from those kind of guns, so I just quickly transform tool, and then you can grab the corners with Control and warp them into perspective. Sometimes this works with you. I'm kind of struggling trying to find some sort of shape that works, but just it's an easy way to kind of break up shapes that, again, are the safe shapes. And from drawing guns and looking at reference, I have looked at plenty of M4s, so that buttstock is pretty much engraved in my brain, and it will come out here and there. So using the transform tool definitely helps, taking those safe shapes and creating something more unique and different. Again, using the shift key, I can create these straight lines. When I want to fill something in, I really don't have to use the shift key at all. I can just fill it in as we go. This technique I do a lot, where I will cut and paste shapes from other parts of the gun and shoving them into places, trying to see if I can recreate an interesting shape. This one looks pretty cool, especially with the negative space inside of there. You definitely, Photoshop is a very powerful tool, and using the tools that it comes with wisely is what makes digital artists successful, I believe. Photoshop, it's just a tool. It's not there to make your work stellar. No matter how many editions they have with content awareness scale or whatever, all these new tools that they keep adding, it may help with workflow, but it won't make you a better artist. And definitely, using that technique where even grabbing the whole gun and flattening it with the transform tool to try and come up with unique shapes definitely helps with workflow. And that's the whole key with this, is just creating really quick silhouettes and making sure to keep them interesting at the same time. I'm definitely running into some issues right now. It's really heavy down here, so I'm just going to erase a little bit out of there to try and make it a little bit more balanced, so it doesn't seem like, if someone's going to be actually carrying this, that it's just going to weigh down on them really hard. And making that bottom. I'm not too sure what you would really call that. I know the trigger is in the middle between these 2 points right now, and just making that bottom part smaller helps balance this gun out a little bit, so it makes it a little bit more believable that someone can actually hold it. Obviously, this is pretty far-fetched. These guns are already look pretty massive, but as styles progress with games, you can make your hero character, your main character, a really bulky guy that can hold these kind of guns. And you can also, kind of convince yourself that, this is a sci-fi gun. Technology has advanced. There's probably different metals out there that, this thing can probably weigh as much as a basketball with the right fake technology. It's sci-fi. You can go as far as you want with it, really. This is where I was talking about where the pistol grip will be. I kind of wanted it to put his arm within the gun. It's just a different way. I'm kind of thinking ahead right now with character and how a character would look like holding it. And I think with the grip being inside like that, it will make the character look a little bit interesting, and definitely it's not a traditional way that guns are built, so more pluses to add on to making this unique. One thing that I like to do when creating silhouettes, once I have a shape that I like, sometimes just cutting out a little bit of it, just to kind of define where these parts will be in space. These guns aren't made all in one chunk. They're machined. They may have screws that assemble these parts together, and just by grabbing a chunk out of there and changing the color gives it an illusion that it's not as wide as the gun itself, and it's a little bit set inside of the gun. So you're creating some sort of depth right away, and this just helps communicate more the design that you're going through to an art director or client. I wouldn't suggest showing silhouettes to an art director right off the bat unless they're really polished. This maybe when we get to the second part of this tutorial, where you get a little bit more detail in there, you can kind of showcase it. Again, these things are done so quick. This was done in 30 minutes, and if you do silhouettes in 30 minutes and you go to your art director and say, hey, look what I got, he's usually a busy guy, and sometimes it's really hard to tell whether or not where you're going with the design at such an early stage. These silhouettes are mainly for you. You usually will see things that your art director will not, and the more you have to explain what's going on, you're kind of failing at being a concept artist, essentially. Your design, your silhouettes, your finals, all that, they should really speak for themselves, and something at such an early stage, there's not a lot of going on. I mean, these are very flat designs. I mean, sure, there are times where your art director may like a certain silhouette, but I can bet on it that he will tell you to flesh it out more and more to see where you're going with it. And I don't know how many times I've been trying to jump that gun and going to my art director and asking him, hey, what do you think of these designs? Sometimes I get a little stuck. Sometimes I think I have something that is worth showing, or sometimes I'm in a crunch mode where I have a lot of things to do and I want to try and get something approved as soon as possible. But most of the time when I show something that is usually silhouettes, it ends up me going back to my desk and just polishing it up a little bit more, just so the art director can see a little bit more about what's going on. It's always nicer to see a little bit more in production. And now we are ready for our third gun. Using the same method before for duplicating a layer, I'm going to choose the second gun we made. Duplicating easily with Control J and just giving it some more room by cropping out and using the background color to fill it in. Grabbing shapes again from parts that already exist within the gun. It definitely helps a lot to make this gun seem like it was made by one fabrication company. If you have all these odd shapes that aren't really repeating within a gun, it usually looks like it was mashed up together in some sort of shop. It definitely can't help. I mean, if that's the style you're going for, go ahead, do it. But this gun, I like my guns looking clean, uniform, balanced, and whenever I copy a shape, I never, usually keep the whole shape. Erasing out some parts definitely helps just to make it somewhat unique, but it still has some of that silhouette from that previous shape in there, just get some sort of familiarity in there. And I'm going to extend the barrel a little bit, just so it seems like a gun that can shoot more further down range than the previous gun. That's another thing that goes down to engineering. I mean, it's a very, very common knowledge with guns. The longer the barrel, the longer the range. In some cases, they're making barrels called free-floating barrels now. That the barrel actually never touches the handrails or the foregrips. So it gives it a lot more accuracy, and you can, knowing these things can definitely help you put more story to your gun. If I wanted this gun to be insanely accurate, I would try and show that by using that, by making it have a free-floating barrel. Again, taking chunks out, looking at my other silhouettes to see if I can find any shapes in here. You can always grab shapes from these older existing ones and slapping them onto another one. It's a pretty easy way to come up with a lot of silhouettes. These are generally kind of different from each other to an extent. I know I used to see a lot of silhouettes when I was working at WB Games, where these silhouettes would be just little steps, something added more than the previous, and this is when it comes down to really fine-tuning, a character or an object that has a lot of value to a gun. These kind of processes with silhouettes definitely are more towards the later stages when the art director wants you to spend more time on something to really find that key all-star design. So I'm continuing, again, just cutting out shapes, using the same process that I've been using since the first gun. Trying to find something interesting, maybe that's another piston of some sort, maybe it's a stabilizer, I'm not too sure. This scope is bothering me. I'm just going to grab it and flatten it down a little bit, see what happens. Looks pretty good. The shape that I created looks very stealthy. It really helps sell that it's a sniper rifle. Definitely, when I was looking at my reference, I did mention that I was looking at machines, but also looking at even insects or animals. can help you just generally come up with ideas of shapes. And shapes, usually they can express an emotion. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but you know, that scope, it looks stealthy because it's streamlined. If you look at a lion or a cheetah, when it's stalking its prey, it's hunkered down and it looks stealthy. And if you, you know, they try and keep as low to the ground as possible. And if you're to look at them on a side view, you know, it's very compressed vertically. So borrowing ideas like that from nature, even to help you create these inorganic shapes, you know, like this gun, can one, have the viewer, because you know, people watch Discovery Channel, they watch, they know a little bit about animals, they know what cheetahs look like, and if you have something that looks like something else in real life, for example, that scope may look like a cheetah, it can kind of give that away, and it can help sell that this gun is stealthy. Even with like armor, looking at if you're doing a character and you wanted to create some sort of interesting armor for that character, looking at, you know, a rhinoceros or even dinosaurs can help you make something look unique and interesting, but at the same time give it some sort of familiarity for the viewer. So usually when I put in these cuts, it's one for design, but it's mainly there to help me remember what I want this section to look like. You know, it looks kind of sloppy. There's some parts that aren't really completed at this point. But these cuts and these little designs with just a fine brush are really just there for me when I take this into part 2 and flush this out a little bit more. You'll see I retained some of that information, and it helps me remind myself what was really going on in there. Again, copy and pasting, and using the transform tool to flip it horizontally helps me add in detail, make something look interesting. These silhouettes are starting to look pretty good. Usually for stuff like this, I would have way more variety of a gun, of a certain gun. But since I'm not too sure, you know, it's a sci-fi sniper rifle, there's mechanics that you can take from you know, spaceships and throw them in here to make them look even more unique. If I was to do, you know, say a modern sniper rifle, it's going to be more of taking shapes that already exist within guns and trying to make something different that way. And it's all mind games, really. If it's something modern, you know, what you see is what you really get, and if someone doesn't see modern, then you kind of failed at that topic. But since this is sci-fi, we can, you know, be a little bit crazy. Here's a cool technique. This little square up here is preserve transparency, and if I'm on a layer with one of these silhouettes here, I can use this preserve transparency and draw even outside of these lines and outside of the silhouette, and these lines will stay within the silhouette without going outside of the lines. And this is a super helpful tool. I use it a lot for shading guns. As you can see, there's a more clear example of the effect you get. I use this a lot for shading. It helps keep my strokes within a defined area. So that's pretty much it for these guys right here. In terms of which one I like the most, this third one is my favorite. It was a bounce back and forth between the first and the third one, but the third one I can see being a lot more interesting and unique, mainly because of where the grip is positioned, and it has a pretty interesting scope. So this concludes part 1 of this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a little bit something. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will be taking the third silhouette and refining it a little bit more.